Hello, and welcome to Most Useful. I'm Steve, and this is the first of a series of videos showing you the basics of programming JavaScript. In this video, we're going to set up Windows Subsystem for Linux and Visual Studio Code. We need both of these to start learning to code JavaScript applications. We'll then go on to create a very basic, simple JavaScript application at the end to make sure it's all working properly. Before we begin, I'm not a JavaScript expert. In fact, I'm not an expert at anything. If you want more in-depth stuff, I highly recommend Dave Gray's channel or Learn with Jason. I'll pop links to both of those in the description below. They're where I get my own learning from. But with that said, let's make a start. So before we can do anything with JavaScript, we're going to need to set up our Windows machine. That is, if you're using Windows, of course. Personally, I prefer the Mac, but there's lots of people out there, of course, that want to use Windows. So we can do it directly on Windows, but it's really kind of awkward. And if you're going to be hosting anything that you do, you're likely to need to learn how to use Linux anyway. So we're going to set up the Windows Subsystem for Linux. So to do that, first of all, I'm going to open up a command window, command prompt. So CMD, and that will open up your command prompt. From there, we can type WSL or WSL -- install. It does require permissions, but it's allowed us to give them. And we need to make that change too. Basically going to have to say yes to anything it asks us. Just thinking about this one, isn't it? If it takes too long, I'll speed it up in various places because there's no point staring at a screen when it's just doing its thing, and your connection might be faster than mine, or it might be slower, who knows. So it's going to download a Linux distribution called Ubuntu. It's one of the most popular. It's the one that works best with Windows Subsystem for Linux. If you prefer a different distribution, you can, of course, look at that yourself and decide that you prefer Fedora or any of those others that might be available, Debian. But Ubuntu's the one we're going to go with. It's the most common, and it's the one that just does have the best integration with Windows. Let's speed this one up. There we go. So I need to reboot now. While I'm rebooting, just to let you know, I actually started this series because my daughter decided she wanted to learn JavaScript. So you can thank her for that. Leave her a message in the comments. Her name's Yenna, and I'm sure she'll be happy to hear this. That is this video is dedicated to her, and is all her fault. Obviously, we're going to have to wait for this to reboot, so I'm going to speed this up as well. Don't forget to leave that comment while you're waiting, though. Okay, so we're rebooted. I just need to enter my PIN again. And it's failed. Please enable the virtual machine platform Windows feature and ensure virtualization is enabled in the BIOS. Now, you probably won't have to do this. I hope you don't have to do this because that is going to be something that's a bit too technical for this channel. Most PCs will have that enabled by default. Now I'm running this on a virtual machine because it's running on my Mac. So I'm going to have to, in this case, I'm going to have to default to be what we call WSL 1. And actually I need that to be privileged. Bear with me. So the reason for this is that Windows Subsystem for Linux actually runs as a virtual machine under Windows, but because my Windows is running within a virtual machine already, it can't do it. So I need to make sure that we're going to use version 1, which doesn't run in a virtual machine, but it has some advantages, has some disadvantages. I prefer WSL 2. But nevertheless, it's not going to work. So I need to turn on the features. Windows Subsystem for Linux. I might just check that this doesn't actually fix it, because it might do, so we'll restart. More updates, I'm afraid. You get used to this with Windows. Let's see if it will allow me to do that. No, it won't. So I am going to have to switch it to WSL 1. Come out of that. Go back into Ubuntu, which was recently added. Now it will let me do what I need to do. You shouldn't need that step. If you find for some reason that your PC doesn't support virtualization and you get that error message, I've left that in this video just in case you do, but hopefully you won't. So now we're actually installing Ubuntu. So this is putting Linux inside of Windows, as it were. The first part was really just setting the scene, so to speak. While that's doing that, we're going to want some way of actually editing our JavaScript and being able to conveniently do that. So we're going to download a product that's free from Microsoft called Visual Studio Code. It's pretty much the best way of editing, well, anything these days: PHP, JavaScript, HTML, etc. This is now returned, so I'm going to log in, or give it my login details. These are different to your Windows login details. Most of the time you won't even need to worry about that. It will automatically default. So there you go. We've got Steve at Steve's MacBook, even though it's Windows. The power of virtualization. Right, we're going to go to the Windows Store, or the Microsoft Store, beg your pardon. And we're going to download Visual Studio Code. Now that's actually downloading the store at the moment. While that's looking for that, we also have Windows Terminal, which is far better than the command line that I've just used there. So this is Windows Terminal. I'm going to switch that so that the default is Ubuntu, and I'm also going to pin that to my taskbar so that I know exactly where to find it. Here's the Windows Store been installed. Visual Studio Code. Hopefully it installs this time. Just for anyone that's interested, this is a virtual machine running on an Apple MacBook Air, the M2 Air. It's got 8 gigs of RAM and the 256 gigabyte hard drive, which everybody says, don't do it, you can't develop on that, it's too underpowered. Well, let me tell you, it's not too underpowered. I'm actually obviously recording this video with it, running a virtual machine and using Filmora 13 in the background to actually do the video screen capture. So I'm running VMware Fusion, Filmora and Windows all at once, and it apparently shouldn't be able to do that, but it does. It's not snappy by any stretch of the imagination, but it's acceptable, or at least I think it is. Let's close that one off. Hopefully Visual Studio Code got installed. Says it did, but there we go, Visual Studio Code. So we'll run that. And this is Visual Studio Code. None of that is overly interesting, but this part is interesting. It says you have Windows Subsystem for Linux installed on your system. Do you want to install the recommended WSL extension from Microsoft for it? Yes, we most certainly do. That will make life so much more easy, because what will happen is that Visual Studio Code is a Windows app, but all of the stuff we're going to be doing is actually going to be Linux stuff. but it's pretty much seamless if we install that WSL extension. So what we're now going to do, so future Steve here, what you're watching here, and I'll probably end up speeding it up a bit, but is a load of old nonsense. I didn't need to do it, and I couldn't remember how to actually get Visual Studio Code and WSL to integrate, and it turns out it's really simple. I didn't need to go through any of this business, which didn't work anyway, but I thought I'll leave it in. I will speed it up because it's nonsense, but I've left it in because otherwise the video would just jump and you'd be like, what is going on there? So yeah, okay, here we go, speed up time. Hello, future Steve again. So this bit that you're watching now is what I should have done originally, and that is that I need to connect Visual Studio Code to WSL, and that's what's happening here. Let's get back to normal. That's the bit I missed. I didn't need to do all those upgrades, so when you connect, as I did there, it installs the necessary components for you into the WSL. Now this is telling me, because I'm using WSL 1, that I should in fact upgrade to WSL 2, but of course I can't in this situation, but that's okay. You'll be on WSL 2 anyway. You probably won't have that to deal with. Let's close this window because we've got code open already. Oops. I will make the screen or the font bigger and zoom in different places, but so one of the first things we're going to do is, now that we're in Visual Studio Code and we've got it connected to our WSL, we're going to open a terminal. That actually doesn't open a terminal, it opens a terminal within Visual Studio Code. Now you're going to need some Linux commands, and we'll learn those along the way, but one of them is ls, which is basically list the current contents of the current folder or current directory. As we can see, there's nothing there. Or is there? Well, there actually is. So if I say list and I give it the flags AL, so A stands for all and L is for long format, we can actually see there are some files there owned by me. Most of these you don't need to worry about, but there may be times where we have to go and look at them, but they are there. So what I like to do is I like to run my projects from a projects directory. So the Linux command for making a new directory is mkdir, mkdir. So we'll do that, and then if I ls-al again, we can see that we've got the projects directory. In fact, if I just do ls, which again, as I say, is list the contents of the directory, you'll see now we see projects. By default, Linux does not show you all of the files in the directory. Those dot files, as they're called, it hides. Linux is case sensitive when it comes to changing directory, or in this case CD. If I put in CD projects but I do it lowercase, it will say it does not exist. Windows isn't case sensitive, and nor is Mac actually in general. Mac does understand capitals, but it doesn't care about them. So Linux is case sensitive and you must type it in with the capital letter. I like to store everything in projects. What are we going to do? Well, we now want to write our own JavaScript application. We've got everything installed for being able to develop it, but what we don't have is the ability to run any JavaScript programs. Now there's two ways of doing this. You're probably familiar with JavaScript running inside a web browser. When I first cut my teeth on JavaScript, it was a horrible language and very unreliable, but it was quite fun to make things move on the screen or to annoy people with flashing banners and things. It's come quite a long way since those early days back in 1995, long before most of you were born. But anyway, here we are. The other way is to run what is called NodeJS, and that enables us to run JavaScript on a server. And this is probably the most common way that JavaScript is run these days, and is one of the reasons why JavaScript has improved as significantly as it has over time. If we're running it on a server, then we need to install a server of some kind, don't we? Well, don't worry, we don't need to be installing Apache web server or Nginx web server or any of that. Node.js will actually operate as the server for us. Now, there's a couple of ways we can install it. We can just use the Ubuntu package manager, as I showed you earlier. However, that probably isn't going to give us the version of Node.js that we want. So this starts to get a little bit more tricky. I'm going to open up my terminal window again, which it didn't default to Ubuntu. That's annoying. That's my fault. So we go into settings, change the profile to Ubuntu, save, close the window. That will now let us open up Ubuntu. Now, interestingly, if I type ls for listing here, what are you thinking we will expect to see? Well, we should see that projects directory that we've created. And there it is. How can we install Node.js? Now, don't get confused, because we're installing Node.js on Ubuntu. We're not installing it on Windows. We're using the Windows subsystem for Linux. So let's have a little look. Install Node.js Ubuntu is the top answer. Let's have a look. Now, we're actually on Ubuntu 22.04 here, I would imagine. LSB release. We are indeed on 22.04. So that means this version came out in the year 2022. It says here how to install Node.js on Ubuntu 20.04. Well, we want 22.04, but actually, oh, here we go. We can use it. This one here. I don't want to restore my pages. So this is a Linode. I don't know where that's all gone. That's not very helpful. Yeah, we'll accept cookies. That's entirely up to you whether you do or you don't. So we're not going to obviously run this on Linode. We're running it on our own computer, but the system is the same. Now then, we're going to install a specific version because the ones that come with Ubuntu 22.04 are probably quite out of date. You will need to consider which version of Node.js you want to install. To find out for yourself, because you may be watching this a little bit in the future, we can go to nodejs.org. And the latest long-term version is 20.13.1, and that has long-term support. I would always recommend going with the long-term support version. You can obviously play around with the bleeding edge, as it were, but yeah. So we want version 20. So coming back to here, we're going to need to do this command in our window, but we're going to replace it with 20. So let's copy that, come back to our terminal, and we're going to replace that with 20. So 16 was from those instructions, but we want 20. Because we're running sudo, we need my password again. Basically what it's doing is it's updating the packages, and it's going to fetch in those packages. And what this means is we can now install Node.js using our standard Ubuntu package manager. So we can apt install Node.js. If we don't do that part first, we will get the ones that that come with Ubuntu, and as I say, they're now 2 years old, and quite possibly would have been Node.js 14 or something. Not a real problem for learning necessarily, but if you want to do it properly, you might as well start learning to do it properly. So that's installed Node.js, and to run it, we run node -v, version 20.13.1. Great. Okay, let's just try a nice simple project. We're going to close that window. Let's have a look at how Visual Studio Code operates. We want to open the Explorer. We're connected to remote. We want to open a folder, and we want projects. As you can see, it's reloaded. It's asking us if we trust the author of the parent folder. Well, I am the author of the parent folder. You can see it says Steve here. So yes, I trust the author of the parent folder. Now there's nothing in this folder. Well, what do we want to do? Well, we're going to create a file, and we're going to call it index.js because this is how things normally are done. Normally we use index because that's the first thing that something's going to pick up. You can see down in this corner, it's recognized that we're using JavaScript. So that's pretty handy. Okay, so we've got Visual Studio Code running. We've created our index.js file inside our terminal. In fact, what I'm going to do is open up terminal here. What are we going to do? Okay, we've got everything set up. We're coming to the end of this video, but let's actually just do a quick demonstration, and then we'll get more into how to do more exciting things with JavaScript. But to see it working, it's fairly simple. It's very simple. We're just going to use, whoops, I'm in the wrong window. We're just going to send something out to the user, or to you in fact, so that you can see something happening before we go. So we're going to, in true style for anyone ever learning, we say hello world. We need to save that. You can do that with Control S or Command S if you're on the Mac, or you can go to File and Save, or Save As, but we don't need that. Once that little dot has disappeared, let me show you that again. So we get a dot up here if there is things to be saved. When we do Control S, that goes away. So that file is now saved. If we do remember what the command is, yeah, ls, we can see index.js. To run that, we do node index.js hello world. There we go. That's our system installed, set up and running. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you have, please give it a like, give us a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel because I'm going to be producing more, obviously, for my daughter, as I mentioned right at the beginning. Hope you left a comment to her. Thanks for watching. Catch you in the next one. Bye for now.